The Marshall Plan, also known as the European Recovery Program, was a plan to give Europe $13 billion, which is $130 billion in current dollar value, to help finance the economy and recovery in Europe after it was left in ruins after World War II. This plan lasted between 1948 and 1951 and helped in aiding 17 Western and Southern European countries. The United States feared that with poverty that Europe faced after World War II would make the ideas of communism appeal more to the citizens and therefore increase the chance of the spread of communism. The plan ultimately succeeded because it was able to spark economic recovery within Europe, and it was able to meet its objective, which was restoring the confidence of the European people and economic future of their own countries as well as Europe as a whole. After the Marshall Plan, Western European countries were producing twice as much as they had the year before the war broke out. The increased trade led to the formation of the Northern Atlantic Alliance, and the economic prosperity from coal and steel industries helped to pave the way for the European Union. The name of the Marshall Plan was named after Secretary of State George C. Marshall. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1953 for the plan. During World War II, Marshall was the United States Army Chief of Staff, and he was the chief military advisor to President Roosevelt. Winston Churchill also called him the organizer of victory for his leadership in the Allied victory during World War II. Two different ways of creating peace after a war were vastly different. The Treaty of Versailles was so focused on placing the blame of the war on certain countries, and it didn't focus on rebuilding Europe, which led to the rise of dictators and ultimately led to the start of World War I. The Marshall Plan was different because it did not place the blame of the war on any country. It was all focused on rebuilding war-torn Europe and restoring it to its original glory. But even when doing that, it offered help to countries who the Allies had just defeated. But the major difference between these two plans is that one of them failed majorly and the other one was a huge success. The Soviet Union did not react well to the Marshall Plan. At a meeting held between the representatives of the British and French governments, Foreign Minister V.M. Molotov didn't accept the Marshall Plan. The first reason he didn't accept the aid was because the plan offered to help Germany, and the Russians didn't like the thought of this plan lending aid to the enemy who had devastated their country. The second reason they didn't like the plan was because the Soviet Union wanted to be able to have complete control and freedom of action over any of the funds that Germany might receive. The last reason is that Foreign Minister Molotov wanted to know how much the United States would be giving to each nation. After finding out that his ideas were not reciprocated, he stormed out of the meeting. In the weeks following the meeting, the Soviet Union pressured its European allies to reject the Marshall Plan, and all of its satellite nations did not participate in the plan. The United States reacted by enacting the plan and responded by saying that the stance that the Soviet Union was taking was meant to isolate Eastern Europe and enforce its communist and totalitarian ideas. The Soviet Union argued that its refusal to participate was for their desire to remain free from American economic imperialism and domination.
NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or it is also known as the North Atlantic Alliance. One of the purposes of NATO is for peaceful resolutions of disputes between countries, but if the dispute cannot be handled without fighting, they have the military capacity to undertake crisis management. The countries involved agreed to a mutual defense in response to an external party attacking one of the countries in the pact. The North Atlantic Treaty was signed on April 4th, 1949. The original countries involved in this pact was the United States, United Kingdom, Italy, Portugal, Norway, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Iceland, Canada, Belgium, Denmark, and France. Although those were the original countries, that has not stopped the treaty from growing. Currently, there are 28 members, with the two nearest members, Albania and Croatia, joining in 2009. The treaty is still open to any European country who is able to further the principles of the treaty and is able to contribute to the safety of the North Atlantic area. Civil War, NATO wasn't involved in a single military engagement, but for most of the 20th century they remained vigilant and prepared. But before NATO engaged in its first major crisis response operation in the Balkans, NATO conducted several other military operations like Operation Anchor Guard from August 10, 1990 to March 9, 1991, Operation Ace Guard, January 3, 1991 to March 8, 1991, Operation Allied Goodwill 1 and 2 from February 4th to the 9th and February 27th through March 24th, 1992, and Operation Agile Genie from May 1st through the 19th, 1992. The Warsaw Pact was a pact between the Soviet Union and its satellite nations of Albania, Poland, Romania, Hungary, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Bulgaria. This pact called on the member countries to come to the defense if any member was attacked by an outside force, and it had a unified military command under Marshal Ivan S. Konev of the Soviet Union. The reason this pact was created was because in 1955 the NATO allowed West Germany to become a member, and the Soviets saw this as a threat and they responded with the Warsaw Pact. The pact lasted until 1991, and over the time it was intact, Albania left, as did East Germany, so that they could reunite with West Germany and become a part of NATO. Some of the nations that were a part of the pact, like Poland and Czechoslovakia, decided on a non-communist type of government, and with that the pact was dissolved.
Containment was a big idea when America decided to take part in the Vietnam and Korean Wars. Without going into too much detail about the reason for the war in the first place, it is important to understand the United States' involvement and how it related to containment. In both of these wars, there was a possibility of communism spreading, so the United States got involved for that sole reason. They wanted to stop communism. They were willing to risk American lives just to make sure that another country wouldn't fall to communist rulers, and so that in theory, if one of those countries fell to communism, they would all fall. Communism and the fear of it spreading was the main reason that the United States fought in the war efforts in the Vietnam and Korean Wars.